Most people think retirement investing is a lifelong grind where you must keep pouring money in until the day you stop working completely. But there is an exact mathematical moment when your existing investments become powerful enough to carry the rest of the journey alone. No more contributions required. No heroic saving streaks, just time, compounding, and actual numbers doing the heavy lifting for you. This is not theory. This is math that quietly determines whether you're financially trapped forever or moving toward real wealth with less effort than you ever expected, once momentum fully takes control of outcomes. Here is the uncomfortable reality. Most investors never calculate this tipping point, even though it determines everything about how hard you actually need to work. They assume more saving is always better, always necessary, always urgent. But money follows exponential curves, not straight lines. At some point, growth from compounding becomes larger than growth from new contributions. When that shift happens, your financial engine no longer depends primarily on what you add. It depends on what you already built. That is the moment we are going to locate using clear assumptions, realistic returns, and practical retirement spending targets you can verify. Because once you see the actual numbers, something strange happens. The pressure to constantly invest begins to relax. The fear of missing out shrinks. Your margin in your budget starts to feel real instead of theoretical. You realize that financial freedom is not about endless sacrifice. It is about reaching a point where time becomes your primary investor. Contributions become optional, work becomes flexible, stress becomes manageable, and the system that once felt broken suddenly starts working in your favor simply because the math finally crosses a threshold most people never knew existed until they studied compounding carefully and patiently. Let's do the math from the ground up, because clarity starts with definitions. When people say a retirement portfolio is fully funded, they usually mean one simple thing. The investments you already own can grow enough on their own to support your future spending without needing additional deposits. That does not mean you stop working immediately. It means your current balance, given enough time and reasonable returns, will reach your target retirement number even if you never invest another dollar again from employment income or side earnings or bonuses or tax refunds or unexpected windfalls that many people assume are required. To understand why this matters, we need a realistic retirement target. Financial planners often use the 4% withdrawal rule as a starting framework. If you want to spend $80,000 per year in retirement, you divide that spending by 0.04. That produces a portfolio target of $2 million. This number is not magic. It is simply the estimated amount that can sustainably generate your income while preserving purchasing power over decades of market fluctuations and inflation adjustments across changing economic cycles and policy environments that investors must realistically expect over long retirement horizons ahead. Now, here is where the compounding tipping point enters the picture. Suppose you are 35 years old today and plan to retire at 65. That gives your money 30 years to grow. If markets deliver an average annual return of 7%, which is historically reasonable after inflation, every dollar you currently own will multiply about 7.6 times over those 3 decades. That multiplication factor is what allows present savings to transform into future financial independence without constant new deposits once the base becomes large enough to compound aggressively through long market cycles and reinvested earnings. So let us translate that into actual numbers. If your retirement goal is $2 million and your investments can grow 7.6 times over 30 years, you only need about $263,000 invested today for compounding alone to carry you to that target. That is the breakthrough. Once your portfolio crosses roughly $260,000, time becomes more powerful than additional monthly contributions toward the long-term retirement balance. Most workers chase through constant saving pressure year after year without realizing growth already does most of the heavy lifting from that moment forward. But most people never notice when they cross this threshold. They keep investing aggressively because it feels responsible, it feels disciplined, it feels safe. Yet mathematically, the impact of new contributions gradually shrinks compared to portfolio growth. For example, adding $10,000 per year sounds significant, but once your balance reaches $300,000, a 7% market return generates $21,000 annually without any effort. Your money starts producing more than you can reasonably contribute through labor alone, even during peak earning years when saving feels most intense for families balancing housing, childcare, taxes, and insurance. This shift is deeply psychological. Many financially aware professionals still feel behind even when their numbers show otherwise. They see coworkers maximizing retirement accounts. They hear advice about saving 15% forever. They worry that slowing contributions means losing discipline. But discipline without math creates unnecessary pressure. The goal is not endless effort. The goal is efficient effort. Once compounding dominates the outcome, continuing extreme saving may reduce present life flexibility without meaningfully improving long-term retirement security compared to balanced spending and strategic investing that preserves both future growth and current quality of life for households seeking sustainable financial balance. Let us ground this in a real-life scenario. Imagine Daniel, age 32, earning $90,000 per year. He has already invested $150,000 across retirement accounts. He contributes $12,000 annually. At 7% growth, his portfolio alone will add about $10,500 this year from market returns. That means nearly half his annual progress already comes from compounding, not new saving. Within 5 years, growth will likely exceed his yearly contributions even if his income stays flat and markets behave normally over the full investment cycle ahead for diversified long-term. Now imagine Daniel reaches $260,000 invested by age 36. If he stopped contributing entirely, historical average growth could still carry him near $2 million by retirement. That does not mean guaranteed success. Markets fluctuate, inflation shifts, life changes. But mathematically, the system is now doing most of the work. His job transitions from builder to maintainer, from heavy lifter to supervisor. That identity shift is emotionally difficult because effort feels safer than patience, even when patience produces better long-term financial outcomes under reasonable market return assumptions, supported by decades of historical investment performance data analysis. This is why the fully funded concept changes everything about how you view work, saving, and lifestyle trade-offs. Before this point, each dollar invested meaningfully accelerates independence. After this point, each additional dollar mostly increases comfort or safety margins rather than necessity. You move from survival planning into optimization planning. That is a completely different psychological environment. Instead of asking how much must I sacrifice, you begin asking what trade-offs actually improve my life, while preserving long-term financial stability and maintaining reasonable protection against uncertainty across unpredictable economic conditions and changing personal priorities that evolve naturally with age and experience, income growth, family responsibilities, and health considerations. But before we talk about what happens after reaching this moment, we must be absolutely clear about how to calculate it precisely, because guessing creates false confidence, and false confidence can quietly destroy retirement plans. The calculation itself is simple, but the assumptions must be realistic. First, define your retirement spending. Second, convert that spending into a portfolio target using a sustainable withdrawal rate. Third, project how much time your current investments have to grow until retirement under conservative return expectations adjusted for inflation and fees that gradually reduce long-term compounding. Then calculate how large your current portfolio must be today so that future growth alone reaches the required target. This is basic compound interest math, yet very few people ever run it. They assume retirement planning requires constant deposits until the finish line. But compounding has a momentum phase, just like physics. Once enough mass exists, forward motion continues with minimal additional force. Money behaves similarly because percentage growth scales with size. Larger balances produce larger dollar gains even when return rates remain unchanged across market cycles driven by earnings productivity and global economic expansion over long investment horizons. Historically, here is another concrete example. Suppose Melissa wants $100,000 per year in retirement. Using the 4% framework, she needs $2.5 million. She is 40 years old with 25 years until retirement. At 7% growth, her money will multiply about 5.4 times. That means she only needs roughly $460,000 invested today for time alone to do the rest. Everything above that accelerates comfort, not basic viability of her long-term retirement income plan, assuming disciplined spending and diversified investment allocation aligned with her risk tolerance throughout changing markets. Notice how age dramatically changes the required starting balance. The younger you are, the smaller the fully funded threshold becomes because time multiplies everything. Delay 10 years and compounding has less runway. That means your existing portfolio must be larger before contributions become optional. This is why early investing feels disproportionately powerful. It does not just increase wealth, it reduces future required effort. Time buys freedom from constant saving pressure, which many professionals never experience because they start late or interrupt compounding with withdrawals during critical early growth years, when momentum matters most for building sustainable long-term financial independence. There is also an emotional benefit that rarely gets discussed. When you know contributions are no longer strictly required, your relationship with money changes. You stop viewing income as fuel for survival and start viewing it as fuel for choice. Career decisions become less pressured. Risk tolerance becomes more balanced. Spending becomes intentional rather than guilt-driven. You gain negotiating power with employers because your long-term future is no longer entirely dependent on every paycheck arriving on schedule during uncertain economic cycles that periodically disrupt employment stability across industries and geographic regions for millions of workers simultaneously during downturns. However, reaching this tipping point does not mean risk disappears. Markets do not move in straight lines. Long periods of low returns can delay outcomes. Inflation can raise spending targets. Life events can change priorities. The fully funded calculation assumes reasonable averages, not perfect certainty. That is why many investors continue contributing even after crossing the threshold. Not because they must, but because extra margin increases resilience against uncertainty in future market environments shaped by interest rates policy, changes demographic trends, productivity growth, and geopolitical disruptions that influence global capital markets unpredictably over extended investment horizons, spanning multiple economic cycles. Still, understanding when contributions become optional gives you something incredibly valuable: control. Instead of blindly maximizing every retirement account, you can evaluate trade-offs rationally. Should you invest more or reduce work hours? Should you accelerate mortgage payoff or buy more time with family? Should you build liquidity or increase market exposure? These decisions become strategic rather than reactive. Once you know the math supporting your long-term financial independence already operates largely without additional savings from earned income, going forward into the remaining years before planned retirement under baseline growth assumptions that remain reasonably achievable historically across diversified global markets. And that realization leads directly to the central question most financially aware professionals eventually confront. If contributions are no longer mathematically required, what should you actually do next? Keep investing aggressively, slow down, redirect money toward lifestyle flexibility, or debt reduction? The answer depends on risk tolerance, goals, and personal values. But before making that decision, we must understand the framework that describes this stage of financial life, a concept that explains why contributions can become optional long before traditional retirement actually begins for disciplined long-term investors who harness compounding early and consistently across decades of steady market participation. So, if you take one thing away from this, it's this: understanding exactly when your existing investments can carry you to retirement changes everything. You no longer have to live under constant pressure to save every dollar. The math gives you clarity, control, and a roadmap for smarter financial decisions. Start by calculating your own fully funded threshold, see where compounding already works for you, and make your future contributions a choice instead of a chore. If this video helped you see your finances in a clearer, more stress-free way, hit subscribe for more practical, numbers-driven advice, and turn on notifications so you never miss a strategy that actually moves the needle. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's not about working harder forever, it's about letting smart math work for you.